Welcome to Satsang.
Can you please talk about true fulfillment?
So, the nature of the mind is such that it is not easily fulfilled because it constantly desires things to be different than how they are. And as a result, there's no satisfaction in that. We desire change. We desire things to be different in some way. And this very desiring is dissatisfying. And so when we have a close look at what makes a person feel content, it's difficult because the nature of the mind is not really to be content. It desires change. It wants things to be different. It wants this, it wants that. It also gets attached to whatever it has. And when there's a fear or a threat of any kind towards what it thinks it has, there's more dissatisfaction because there's resistance to losing. And so true contentment is difficult. People can find true contentment in meditation because they can find no mind. And in no mind, there is contentment. But true contentment can only really be achieved when someone wakes up, when they know themselves as truth. Then they are profoundly content for no reason. Mind rests in beingness. And this is what I refer to as also true happiness, to be profoundly content for no reason. And so happiness in ego-based reality is rather fleeting because we desire things to be different than how they are. We get something and, well, it could be a new car. And it's only moments before we want something different about it. Maybe it needs a polish. Maybe there's a tire that needs maybe replacing, a stereo system that needs upgrading, or maybe it needs seat covers. There's always something, because this is the nature of the mind. It is never really content. It is in a flux in a way because it desires things to be different than how they are. And because this happens so often, it's not noticed. People don't recognize that they're actually dissatisfied with life, which is definitely not contentment. And this is summed up in Buddha's Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth being life is dissatisfying. He got it right. Life is dissatisfying because we constantly want things to be different than how they are. He said that this dissatisfaction in the second noble truth was caused by our constantly desiring and our attachment to things. And of course, that's exactly true. But because we live in a hope that things are always going to get better somehow later, we don't notice the dissatisfaction in the moment, in the now. And we live in this illusionary state of later. When you really come to the present and you watch the mind, you see what it's like. You see what it's up to. You see the dissatisfaction. You see the desires. You see the attachments, and you see the resulting resistance to life that is actually occurring. And if we're resisting life, we're not satisfied. We're not content. But in meditation, when the mind stills itself, we can find contentment. And if we're present to reality in mindfulness, there's a certain level of contentment as well. It's only when we're living in our heads that we get discontent. And so you go into any ashram or any monastery anywhere in the world, and the first thing they're going to teach you is meditation. So you can get out of this and into a little bit of contentment. But of course, meditation is a stepping stone to higher consciousness and to superconsciousness, superconsciousness being enlightenment. Then there is profound contentment for no reason when that's aware becomes aware of itself, when beingness knows itself. And so that's the quest for the seeker. Are there any questions? Any statements? Any challenges to this teaching today?
The first question is as follows. I find myself thinking I will be fulfilled if I make my relationship work. Can I find happiness in the perfect relationship?
Yeah, in a moment you can, but then the next moment you'll be wanting something else. And so when we get our desires fulfilled temporarily, and I do mean very temporarily, we do feel a certain satisfaction, but it does not last because it is not the nature of our mind to be content. It's the nature of the mind to actually want things to somehow be different. And so, yeah, you can get some contentment in relationship, but not for long, because the mind will want something else. It will want to do something else. It wants something different. And so it doesn't last. Can I find the perfect relationship? The perfect relationship is the relationship your mind has with beingness, or your mind has with your own heart. That's the perfect relationship. When your mind is willing to give everything to heart and everything to truth, you have the perfect relationship.
The following question is from a viewer. Is fulfillment and contentment the same as equanimity?
Okay, so equanimity, when we're talking about equanimity in Buddhist terms, is basically the mind stays level no matter what is happening. If bad things are happening, the mind stays level. If good things are happening, the mind stays level. It doesn't go on a roller coaster ride. So developing an equanimous mind means removing the things that cause contraction and resistance in us, so the mind stays level. And you could say a mind that is equanimous is relatively content, but it'll still be a mind that desires things and gets attached to things. So it's still a mind that will suffer dissatisfaction. Now, that dissatisfaction won't be as great as someone who hasn't actually trained the mind, who doesn't have an equanimous mind, but it'll still be there. The only way to have true satisfaction is to go beyond the mind, or have no mind at all. When we were little kids, up until the age of about 4, we lived in no mind. We were just present to what was happening around us. And there's a certain contentment in that, a certain wonderment in it. But then we went to school and we learned how to live in our heads. And most people have lived in their heads since. And living in the head is a place where you find dissatisfaction because you're constantly desiring things to be different. Have a look for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Have a look and see, what is it like to be in your head thinking all the time? What actually happens there? Is it not a series of desires for things to change in some way? Have a look.
Often I find myself dreaming of a holiday far away from my stressful work schedule. But then when I'm there, I find a way to stress about other things. How can I find fulfillment even when in stressful situations?
Okay. If you have a habit of stressing out when you're at work, you're going to take it with you wherever you go because that's your pattern. And so you can go away on a holiday, but it doesn't make much difference because it's your nature to create stress. And people think, oh, that's not true. Yes, it is true. We run true to our default patterning. We're just like, this is just like a little computer that does what it's programmed to do. We can change things temporarily with discipline, but when we relax and our default patterns come back in, they play out unconsciously and reactively. And it's up to you. If you really want to find fulfillment in stressful situations, you have to learn to accept life as it is. That means stop resisting what is. Now that's relatively difficult because it's not something we would have been taught at school or we learned from our parents, yet it is the key to being relatively happy, to accept life as it is rather than constantly resisting it. That sounds easy, but it's not. And the reason it's not is because you're not programmed for it. You're programmed to resist life. You're programmed to be stressed. That's what you learned to do when you're at school. That's what they trained you to do. And so instead of teaching us at school how to be happy and how to be relaxed, they taught us how to be efficient little stressed out machines. When you look at it, that's just wrong. But that's what's happened to all of us. And so we can learn to be relaxed. We can learn to let go. We can learn to accept life as it is. But that's a learning curve. And that only occurs as a result of practice, not as a result of collecting knowledge. Whatever you practice will become your default patterning. If you practice acceptance long enough, it will become your default patterning and you'll have a much nicer life.
The next question is from Arun.
Hi, Arun.
Hey, Vish. I'd just like some clarity on this. I was reading this on Osho's website and I was wondering if you could just tell me if I'm understanding it correctly. So someone asks him a question saying, Osho, where is the witness when the observer and the observed become one? And he replies saying, the observer and the observed are two aspects of the witness. When they disappear into each other, then they become one, and the witness for the first time arises in totality. But this question arises in many people. The reason is they think that the witness is the observer. And then he goes on to say that that's not the case. So yesterday when I was asking you about just watching my thoughts and not interpreting them or analyzing them, I'm not really witnessing them. I'm not really a witness according to what Osho is saying, is he? I'm really just the observer observing my thoughts, which are the observed.
That's true.
Is that correct? Yeah.
That's
so
true.
Is this all, I'm still just playing a game in my mind?
Well, ultimately, the witness is that's aware of the mind, ultimately. But most people can't locate that because they're not awake. And so Osho's talking from the perspective of being enlightened. And that can be understood by someone else who's enlightened, but it's a little difficult to understand if you're ego-based. The ultimate witness is pure awareness, that is aware of the mind. But when that is aware of the mind becomes aware of itself, that is enlightenment if it's ongoing. And for most people, that's not the case. That's not how they live. And so it's a little confusing when someone who's awake talks from their perspective of being awake to people who are ego-based, because the truth is they're not going to understand him. And Osho did that quite regularly. Sometimes he would flip. He would talk from an ego-based understanding of what was going on to a being-based understanding of what was going on, and it was confusing. And in this case, what you've just quoted, he's doing just that.
Yeah, I mean, from reading different things, I've noticed in some places, as you said, he interchangeably uses observing and witnessing. So I'm gathering from that the basic practice that someone who's a seeker who hasn't awakened yet is to observe what's happening without judging it. But
that's right. That's it. And that's a role of the mind.
Yeah. And that's the role of the mind, yes.
A lot of people don't have that role very strong, but that role can be developed very strongly where it just observes without judgment.
And by doing that, you and he is suggesting that witnessing will arise if I can continue to just be conscious and observe and not try and analyze. Is that correct?
That's a possibility, but not necessarily so.
Okay.
So when awareness becomes aware of itself, sometimes that's referred to as the ultimate accident. When awareness turns back onto itself. And that accident is more likely to occur in the presence of someone who's awake than not.
Okay.
And that is one of the uses of satsang, one of the benefits of being in satsang. Satsang being in the presence of someone who's awake or in the presence of truth, because there is the potential for a person to discover themselves as truth in that energy field, in that Buddha field.
So when I'm not in satsang, how am I to observe rightly so that I continue on the path correctly?
You just keep using the observer that the mind has developed, but it's not necessarily going to take you home. You can use self-inquiry, which you were practicing earlier, to take you home, to turn awareness back to itself. That's a possibility, but if the mind hasn't been prepared for what is found when awareness turns back on itself, it's likely to actually attract awareness back to itself again through its contracting to life.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So,
yeah, because...
Yep.
Sorry, you go.
Well, people who are quite advanced can use self-inquiry to turn awareness back to itself. But they can't stay there because their mind has not been trained yet. It keeps contracting in life, so awareness pulls away from itself and back onto the mind. And I call these people flip-floppers, flipping from being-based, ego-based reality, because they haven't done enough work yet on their own minds to surrender.
Yeah, so this is what you're saying is exactly what happens now for me, because there's two distinct flavors between self-inquiry and any kind of observing and witnessing. Observing and witnessing for me feels like, as I was saying to you yesterday, if I observe the breath or anything that isn't the mind, then it feels like a silence period, but I can't remember the words that you used yesterday, but it's not sustained. Whereas if I do self-inquiry, it feels different, like I'm connected to something, but as you said, it flips and flops. I can't sustain that kind of awareness on whatever comes when I inquire, who am I, or where am I, or when am I?
And these people who can flip-flop, some of them hold satsang. And I call these people half-baked enlightened, because they're not fully home. But if they sit for a little while and self-inquire before they hold satsang, they can hold the space. But they're not living it 24 hours a day because they're not home. They're still practicing.
So further down in this article, Osho says, you cannot practice witnessing. You can only practice being conscious. Witnessing comes as a consequence, as a shadow, as a byproduct. The more you become conscious, the more you will go into witnessing, and the more you will eventually become the witness. And the witness too is not the final. Eventually, the witness leads you to jump point where you go to awareness. So to distill all of that down for me, the seeker, all I can really do is be as much as possible conscious of everything that I do 24 hours a day. That's essentially what he's saying, right?
In a way, that's what he's saying. It's a bit like if you can turn awareness on itself, awareness is like a great big abyss. There's just vast nothingness or vast emptiness, right? It's just huge. And the mind can witness it. The mind can witness it. It's like the mind walking around an abyss and just watching the emptiness. At some point, and this is where the accident occurs, at some point, Instead of witnessing the abyss, you find yourself as the abyss.
Yeah.
That's enlightenment.
Okay. So, so I'm taking away from this that I have to just continue doing what I'm doing, but the accident, I mean, I guess when you use the word accident, it automatically makes me think that I have no control over when the accident happens. But there's
Not
nothing that I can do as a seeker to get to the accident faster.
Well, you can self-inquire and you can prepare the mind for that accident. That's what the seeker does. The seeker prepares the mind for the accident. A mind that is equanimous, a mind that doesn't get ruffled by the outcomes of the world, will support enlightenment. But a mind
that is
that's constantly contracting is not going to support it.
Okay. And inquiring into this mind, which is essentially what I was asking you about yesterday, where I observe the thoughts that come up, and then I can essentially, for example, yesterday we used an example of, say, my partner is disloyal to me, and
Betrayal.
that makes me contract. Yeah, betrayal, correct, sorry. Betrayal. Say my partner betrays me, and that makes me contract. The question I could ask myself, if that thought comes up when I'm observing my thoughts, well, why does it matter that she betrays me? Or why do I feel hurt by this betrayal? That's a way to address that thought, correct?
If it's truly accepted, then the story is over. And this is one of the ways that you can tell whether you've dealt with something or not. If you're truly in acceptance, there is no more story. It's a full stop. But if you've still got something going on, some kind of resistance to what's going on, the story will probably continue.
Yeah. Okay. Because yesterday I was thinking, as I was sitting down and trying to observe some of my thoughts, some of the I've realized a large percentage of the thoughts that come up are just they're just egoic, stupid thoughts. So I was thinking to myself, why should I even try and rationalize my way out of why these thoughts are stupid, and not just label them as dumb thoughts and say, I'm not even going to entertain this thought. You'll go away in time.
I wouldn't do that, because you've given your mind another job. And when you come close to enlightenment, the ego tries to survive, because it's a survival mechanism, by helping. It develops helper thoughts, and those thoughts also have to be surrendered.
Okay. And when you say surrender, are you saying I shouldn't apply the concept, the thought, this is a stupid thought, I'm not even going to entertain you, but instead ask the question, why am I having this thought? Why is this thought not supporting me?
Don't entertain the thought, and don't analyze it. Don't give it a label at all.
Okay. But then how will it just go away? Okay.
Ignore it. Don't give it any energy.
Okay.
After a while, if you don't give the mind's thoughts energies, the mind starts to atrophy in its conversation with itself. I noticed after awakening, 6 months later, the mind had completely stopped talking to itself. But before that, it was like it had shifted from one room to another room, further and further away from me, because there was just no interest in itself at all. What the interest was beingness, and resting in beingness, awareness aware of itself.
What if the thought makes me contract?
You don't support that either. It's tricky. It is tricky, because we've been programmed to analyze and work things out and control. And really what we're talking about in unconditional surrender is the letting go of all control.
Okay. So say a thought comes up that I think my partner is betraying me. How would you suppose I address this thought?
Don't address it. Leave it.
So just watch it come up and just eventually let it go.
Yeah, be the witness of it. Yeah.
Okay.
See, that what you've been programmed to do, what you've been trained to do is work it out. And that's the
Yeah.
problem, because that's just
Yeah.
another dream. You're just taking yourself into another dream.
Yeah. Okay. I can do that.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't you do that? That's what you were programmed to do. That's what we're all taught to do. But it's a problem because it takes us into another dream, and dream is lower consciousness.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It's yeah. The journey continues.
There's only now, Arun. There is no journey. There is no journey. You are already beingness. You are already at your final destination. You're just not aware of it. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, Bish.
Okay, Arun.
The following question has been asked by Kim. What are some techniques for getting out of the head?
Put your awareness on anything except what you think. If you're walking, put your awareness on your footfalls and your arm swings and whatever is around you. If you're actually washing the dishes, wash the dishes. Don't think about anything. Just wash the dishes. Be with the dishes. Just put your awareness on anything except what you think. That's the best way to get out of your head. It's called mindfulness training. You're training the mind to be aware of what is actually real rather than what is not. That's the best way. I think Kalimba wants to ask a question, Tosh.
Yes, the next question is from Kalimba.
Aha. Hello, Kalimba. I can't hear you if you're talking. I still can't hear you. Now you've muted yourself and you've unmuted yourself, but I still can't hear you. It must be a problem at your end because we were just talking to Arun quite clearly. Sorry, Kalimba, I still can't hear you. I think we're going to need to go on to other questions.
Okay, we'll move on until Kalimba is back with us.
Yeah.
The next question has been written by Rebecca. She writes, Hi Vishrant, can you please share your experience with metta meditation? For example, in the past, did you find it beneficial for contentment? How would you practice metta in formal meditation without using statements in the mind like, may all beings be safe? Thank you.
Yeah. Look, I did practice metta meditation in the 80s when I got in touch with meditation techniques. But I found that the constant talking was keeping me in my head. And so I stopped it and took up meditations that took me to no mind instead. If you really want to send love out to all beings, open up, drop all your defenses, and love will be perceived. And then you can love everybody because you become an oasis of it. It is in openness that love is perceived. It is only in closure that love is missed. And so people who are highly defended quite often don't feel much love. Words themselves aren't love. Saying lovely words about things, that's not love. Love just loves. And if you can open up and drop your defenses, you can perceive love and you can become an oasis of it in that vulnerability, in that openness. And then you'll want to serve it. And in the service of love, you take care of everything and everyone. And so I don't really advocate metta meditation because it tends to keep people locked in their minds. And somehow they think that the words are love. Words are not love. Words come from the mind. Love is real. The mind is not. Open up. Drop all your defense systems. Become vulnerable. And you'll perceive love. And then you become an oasis of love for others. I'll leave that with you.
The following question has been asked by a viewer. Is suppressing desires or letting go of changing the external world helpful?
You know, the best thing you can do is find yourself as truth. I advocate letting go of everything. I advocate surrender. I advocate acceptance of life. I advocate happiness. I advocate love. I advocate those things that support love, support happiness. And those things are acceptance and surrender. Our resistance to life is what keeps us in misery. Nothing else. It's not the world that keeps us in misery. It's not incidents that occur that keep us in misery. It's the way we think. Our constant desiring for things to be different than how they are, and our fear that we're going to lose what we've got, our attachments. When we can see life through eyes of acceptance, it all changes. Then life is simply as it is. And what happens is what happens. Not good, not bad, just what is. This is a very beautiful way to live, but it's not a way that any of us have been programmed. And so we have to learn it, to accept life as it is. It's very beautiful. It's the way of the heart.
Kalimba would like to ask a question.
Hi, Kalimba. Can't hear you. I'd love to have a chat with you, but your silence is deafening. Still no talking. Your mic might be turned down. I don't know. It's your system. But our system's working fine, so it has to be at your end. I still can't hear you, so I'm going to go on to the next question.
The next question has been written by Alana. I'm trying to practice present moment awareness all day and pay less attention to my mind. Sometimes I watch the thought arise and can push it away quickly and come back to the present moment. And other times I watch the thought arise and end up lost in the train of thought. And at some point, I have to snap myself out of the dream to come back to the present moment. Is this the correct practice for watching the mind?
Okay, so that's not watching the mind. That's actually present moment awareness. That's mindfulness training that you're talking about. And that's a little different. Being able to be present to what is real is very important. Most people think that what they think is real. And so they get caught in their minds, in their stories, in their dramas inside their head, somehow thinking it's real. It's important to find a way to get out of that, to actually get back to what is real. So when you're walking, you walk. You support walking. You watch your footfalls. You watch your arms. You look around. You see the trees. You hear the birds. You feel the wind against your face. You feel the sun on your shoulder. Mindfulness training is brilliant because it rescues us from the dream that we've probably been caught in. But that's a little different than what you're asking about watching the mind. Watching the mind is a different practice. You just set up an observer that observes the mind. It just watches, just witnesses everything. And because it's witnessing everything from a non-judgmental space, you have detachment from the mind. So you can see all the games it gets up to. You can see its defenses. You can see its hidden agendas. You can see the belief systems that come into play. And you see how those belief systems defend themselves as well. You finally start to see the nuts and bolts of the mind. And as a result, you can start to undo the things that are in the way of your higher consciousness. You can start to remove obstacles because you can see them clearly. And so watching the mind, or being the witness of the mind, is different to mindfulness training, just being aware of what is real. Maybe you need to do them at different times. Mindfulness training is brilliant though. It is lovely simply to be aware of what's around you. But most adults live in their heads to a large degree. And that's where suffering, that's where discontentment, that's where misery lives. You're better off being in reality.
Next, Emma would like to ask a question.
Hello, Emma.
Good morning.
Good morning. Your mic's working fine. I want to point that out to Kalimba.
Can you show me contentment?
No. You're the creator of your reality, not me.
Mm.
You create your reality by the way you think. I don't do that. You're the responsible solely for how you think and what you think of. I can't help you there. Only you can help you. And contentment is a funny word, because when you hit no mind, there is contentment, but there's no one thinking about it.
What I meant was, I kind of just wanted to tune in and just...
Oh, you want me to blast your mind with energy so you can feel How do you feel now?
I feel layers peeling away.
Ah, layers of what?
Resistance.
Yeah.
And then I fall in deeper.
Yeah. Yeah, you're witnessing the mind falling away. Mm. And now?
It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's good to see you at Satsang on Friday nights.
Likewise. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, you come. I do that 1 hour at Restful Waters on a Friday night. It's always a fun night. There are all the different people that come. I love the Indians.
Yeah, yeah.
They're great.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find it so funny that I'm teaching something or being something that really originated in India, and Indians come to see an Australian white guy holding presents. It's the irony of it just blows me away.
I love the way you teach, Vishrant. You cut away all the bullshit. Oh, sorry. And you simplify it. There's too much mysticism and it makes it difficult to understand. Acceptance, surrender are really beautiful things to take with you.
Yeah, well, I'm not into smells or bells or ritual or anything like that. I'm into what works. I'm very pragmatic. I've removed all the problems. So there's nothing left. Unfortunately, religion tends to have a lot of ritual in it, a lot of smells and bells, and a lot of superstition, and that makes it sick. It's best to take it all away and just have the bones.
Yeah.
And that's just what works and nothing else. So anything that I teach is my own direct experience. It's not borrowed. I know it works, otherwise I wouldn't talk about it.
Walk the talk.
Well, that's another thing that's important for a teacher. Walk the talk.
Thank you so much, Vishrant.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Oh, I got a spot of something on me. Oh, I got it. Bit of fluff.
The following question has been asked by a viewer. Similar to metta, is mantra meditation like a lullaby which dulls and keeps us in the mind?
You see, I used to do mantras. I loved them because they did quieten my mind and they did take me into a nice space. Om Mani Padme Om was one of my favorites. But I wanted to go beyond the mind. I didn't want to stay in the mind. And so I used meditations that stopped the mind so I could sit in no mind. And then I used self-inquiry to go beyond the mind. I'm not against mantras. I just don't teach them because I didn't get anywhere with them. Not to say that someone else might get somewhere with them. I teach what I know works because it was my own direct experience. And even though mantras helped quieten my mind and helped me find a nice space, I was interested in going beyond the mind. And I didn't find that mantras took me beyond the mind. So I don't teach them, though I'm not against them. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you. And anything that works for you is worthy.
When I sit with you, Vishrant, I tune into the silence and I feel a sense of fulfillment. Do I keep tuning into the silence when I'm not around you to continue that experience of fulfillment?
You can do. I was with Osho Rajneesh for 8 years before he died, and I was always able to tune into his presence wherever I was, anywhere in the world, because I'd found the frequency of him, and the frequency was beautiful. It's beingness, it's the Buddha field. And in tuning into him, I could always find the silence and stillness to some level. And so I use that to help me find more and more of that in myself. Someone who's awake is living as presence, and that presence emits an energy field commonly called a Buddha field. You tune into that field of energy and your mind will start to quieten. You'll start to find peace. It is like a portal to your own true nature. And it works. It's up to you though. You're going to do what you want to do. When the Advaita Vedanta teachers came to town some 8 years later after Osho's death, I started to tune into their energy field and I found the same thing. I found that I could find that stillness, that silence, that expanded mind simply by tuning in. It's up to you. Find the frequency and tune in.
The next question is from Satya.
Hey, Satya.
Hello, Vishrant. Vishrant, just a small question. How I can become more and more open?
Are you in a relationship? Are you married or are you single? What's your story?
I'm single. I had a divorce.
Do you have a woman in your life or a partner in your life?
Not yet. I mean, not at this time, but yeah.
So it's going to be very difficult for you to practice openness, I'm afraid, Satya, because when we're in partnership or in relationship with someone, it's easy for us to close and contract when we don't agree with certain things or behaviors, but because you haven't got a partner, it's going to be more difficult for you to practice openness.
I don't know, Vishrant, you are my friend or my enemy?
Because we're in the marketplace, we have to use the marketplace to teach us. And what we need to learn is acceptance and surrender. So anything or anyone who contracts, that we have contractions around, resistance to, is our teacher, because we can use that to practice openness.
Yeah, because Vishrant, I found at the end there is only one way, which is love, and which can can just can get through the openness. So yeah, I want to become more and more open.
But you're in business, aren't you? You're a businessman.
Yes.
Well, you can practice openness in business. That doesn't necessarily mean that you let people walk all over you. It just means that you're open in your negotiations. You're not contracted inside yourself.
Okay.
And the thing about openness is it's actually quite a wonderful aspect to have as a businessman, because one thing that we all trust is actually openness in others. When someone's closed and defended, there's a certain level of suspicion that occurs to what are they hiding in the first place? And so openness in business is actually a positive aspect.
Yeah, but because of that, sometimes people, they betray. But anyway, that's fine. We must have to accept whatever happens.
Sometimes people what?
Sometimes they betray in a business. I mean, when you are open, especially in India, you know, people in Indian mind is a different Vishrant, you know. I mean,
hang on a second, Satya. I didn't say open and shut your eyes. You remain open and you keep your eyes open. So if someone wants to betray, you see it coming. It's not like I'm saying switch off. Stay switched on, but practice business from openness instead of closure.
oh, okay. Thanks, Vishrant. Thanks to open my eye.
Good on you, Satya.
Next, we have Rebecca, who's written a statement. She writes, I've noticed since seeing through the mind more, when I'm talking with people, I feel like I have more of a sense of what is happening for them. I feel like I can also sense when they are being insincere with themselves and or with me. Yet, when I'm in your presence, I can see how I'm being insincere in my life and with myself, even if you don't say anything. It's more of a sensing. This probably sounds weird. I can't quite articulate it into words.
When you're in the presence of someone who's awake, you gain clarity. I found that anytime I was with my teachers who were awake, my clarity level went up. My awareness of everything went up. I was borrowing their clarity through their Buddha field. I was borrowing it temporarily. It's one of the gifts of Satsang, clarity. And so if you're in the presence of someone who's awake, you're going to see a lot more about yourself and a lot more about the world than otherwise, because you're temporarily having your consciousness levels risen because of the Buddha field itself. Use it. Have a good look at yourself. Remove the insincerity.
The next question is as follows. I heard the actor Jim Carrey say, I wish everyone to become rich and famous so that they can see it doesn't make you happy. What would facilitate the realization that happiness is from within?
Oh, Jim Carrey's right. Rich and famous doesn't make you happy. It actually makes you a target. Happiness doesn't come from wealth. It has something to do with feeling that you have enough no matter what. People who are wealthy, who feel like they want more, are not wealthy people. True wealth is knowing you have enough. And when we look at, well, what realization allows you to have happiness, how about being okay with what you've got? Having gratitude for what you've got rather than constantly wanting more. Because no matter how physically wealthy you are, if you want more, you are poor.
So, is it possible to be truly happy before awakening?
I had a thing called manageable happiness before awakening. And manageable happiness came about as a result of serving heart. I chose to serve heart sometime in the early 90s because I couldn't see any other way that was worth living besides serving heart. And in serving heart, you move in service of others. You move in service of the planet. You move in service of anything besides you. And I found that when I was helping others or being in service, there was happiness. There was a form of contentment. There was a form of joy. But I called it manageable happiness because it was related to what I was physically doing. I wasn't just being happy for no reason at all. I was actually doing something. I just loved helping other human beings. That was my thing. So I had gone back to school and I'd trained as a naturopath and a psychotherapist so I could have the tools to help people. Because before that I was a businessman and I didn't have those tools. And I didn't really want to go back into business. So I learned how to help people with their problems. And I found manageable happiness. Just ego-based, manageable happiness. I feel quite strongly that all the misery in the world is brought about by self-serving and selfishness, self-obsession. And all the joy in the world is brought about by giving, being in service. And so I advocate the way of the heart as the way to live in this world because it's a beautiful way to live and it can give you happiness. Not that you do it to get happiness, but it's just a beautiful way to live. This living as an ego, trying to survive and being selfish and self-obsessed is a horrible way to live. Look for yourself and see. It does mean a change. For me to change from selfish and self-obsessed to selfless was a really big deal. I had to learn to be a giver. I had to learn to be a giver in a sense where it was altruistic, where I wasn't looking for a return. And that took a fair bit of practice on my part because pretty much like everyone else, I was programmed to take care of me. And nowadays we live in such a me orientated world where there is so much self-obsession and so much selfishness. People take offense to everything. A little bit of selflessness would go a long way. A little bit of altruism would go a long way. The way of the heart is what this world needs. If it's going to survive anything, it needs people who love, not people who hate, not people who are selfish, not people who are rioting and being violent, but it needs people who love. And the way of the heart is the beauty way.
If I was to find true contentment for no reason, would I still have the motivation to be active in the world?
Maybe not. All true contentment occurring as a result of enlightenment can leave you without any motivators at all, without any drivers at all, because you have surrendered everything. And so for the first 6 months after awakening, I pretty much sat still in a chair 18 hours a day, just staring at space, because I was so profoundly content for no reason. But my teacher, Osho Rajneesh, said, if you find the light, share it. Don't hide it. Go out and share it. And so I started sharing it, hence Satsang. And that is the love affair that my mind has with beingness and with humanity, to share the light, to share the Dharma. But it's possible when you wake up that you won't want to talk again. You don't know. You really don't know what's going to happen after awakening, because you have given your life to truth. You haven't kept any of it for yourself. You've given your life to God. You've let go of control. You've surrendered unconditionally. And what happens is going to happen. It's out of your control. And so for me, after awakening, I lost my psychology business. I lost my naturopathy business, because people would come and they'd sit in front of me and I just wouldn't talk, and they would go away and they wouldn't come back. And I lost my income. I lost my wife, took the kids and left. Everything left, because the awakening was profound. There was no hanging on to anything whatsoever. Everything was perfect as it was. Whatever was happening was absolutely categorically perfect. There's no mistakes. It is only in this love affair with humanity, in this love affair with truth, that Satsang is held. That's the driver for holding Satsang. There's no other driver. The drivers all drop because they belong to the survival mechanism that surrenders unconditionally. Along with those drivers, fear disappears. Haven't experienced fear in 21 years. Anger disappears. It all just disappears. Freedom from the mind. Enlightenment is freedom from the mind. And the seeker is seeking that, to know that as self. There's nothing better. It is the quest of every seeker to wake up and know themselves as that. And Satsang is an invitation to that. Thank you for Satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.